Okay, so since the last time you saw me, we had entered negotiations with Iran, and Vance came out and he said, "Nah, it didn't happen," and the talks essentially collapsed, I think. So now Trump needs a way to, try and apply pressure, I guess, to Iran. I would say in the realm of negotiations right now, and what he's decided to land on is blockading the Strait of Hormuz. Now, eagle-eyed viewers out there might notice something strange about that, and that's that Iran was already blockading the Strait of Hormuz, or at the very least, they were um, only allowing ships that they were aligned with countries that they liked through, or charging people money for them to go through. So this, you might be wondering, what's this going to accomplish? And I'm also kind of wondering that. I mean, I have some thoughts, but I'm going to go and get into the video first, and then I will air my thoughts as I feel throughout. So let's go ahead and watch this one.
Has threatened to retaliate against a planned US blockade of its ports, which is due to start in the coming hours. A statement from the Iranian military described Washington's actions as piracy and warned that Iran would continue to control the Strait of Hormuz. On Sunday, President Trump saying any Iranian who opened fire at vessels passing through the strait would be, in his words, blown to hell. To remind you, the Strait is that critical shipping route through which roughly 20% of the world's oil and natural liquefied gas is transported, plus other key goods as well. Its geography...
Yeah, my understanding is that the American blockade is like down here or something in the Gulf of Oman, whereas Iran's blockade is more just right here in the Strait, for people curious how this is working. I don't think America wants to get super close up here with all of their Navy assets, because Iran has shown that they are willing to, willing to target and destroy those assets if they get too close. So, yeah.
Has allowed Iran to use it as leverage throughout this war, selectively preventing vessels from passing through the narrow waterway and spiking oil prices in the process. Mr. Trump also saying that the US would track down any vessel in international waters that had paid a toll to Tehran to pass through this key route. This escalation, of course, follows that collapse of marathon peace talks in Pakistan at the weekend, as our World News correspondent Joe Inwood explains.
Yeah, so I guess my thoughts here are in terms of strategic stuff, right? I think this is like a nothing burger, to be honest. America is stopping, allegedly going to stop allowing all traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, or like all traffic out, like exporting oil essentially out of the Strait of Hormuz, as opposed to what Iran was doing before, which was allowing certain ships to go out and selling their own oil out on the market and stuff, like allowing Chinese ships to go through and all that, and then charging other people to allow the stuff to flow to them. And so while this will cut off a revenue source, I think, from Iran, number one, I don't know if they're going to, if the talks fail, if they're just going to start firing on them again and stuff. Like, I don't think they will have any qualms at all of like shooting, like firing on any tankers that go through that they have not allowed. I don't think they have any qualms at all of doing that, assuming that the ceasefire completely falls apart, which it seems like it's going to. But also, I don't know if America is really interested in picking a fight with some of these nations that are like importing oil from Iran still, like China and stuff. That would be a pretty big deal if America decided to stop and, try and seize a Chinese oil tanker or something. So there's that as well. And then there's also the fact that, like, at least when Iran was allowing their oil and other people's oil to flow out, if they paid the toll, at least there was oil coming out into the market. Now we're essentially choking off entirely 20% of the world's oil market, which will obviously have a huge impact on America in particular. Like not like as much as the places that are going to have shortages and stuff like the Philippines and whatnot, but but it will impact the oil prices, which is the only thing that, or like the gas prices, which I think is the only thing that Trump is even really sensitive to. So anyway, that's my initial thoughts on it. But let's see what else BBC has to say, and maybe I can give more commentary.
It has become one of Iran's most powerful weapons. One of the world's busiest waterways, the Strait of Hormuz, all but shut by a naval blockade. Only a tiny number of ships get in or out, doing ever-increasing damage to the global economy. Getting it reopened was one of the US's key demands in this weekend's negotiations with Iran. They did not manage to do that, and so seem to have taken a different approach. President Trump posted on social media that the US will begin the process of blockading any and all ships trying to enter or leave the Strait of Hormuz. He also claimed other countries will be involved with this blockade. The US military confirmed that it will...
I have not seen that yet, if any other countries are going to be a part of it. I'd be curious which ones, because we've really pissed off like almost all of our allies at this point.
Begin a blockade, but only of Iran's ports, starting later today.
Very good things are happening with regard to the Strait, Hormuz. I think Iran is in very bad shape. I think they're very desperate.
It's not yet clear how it will be enforced and which other countries...
And it's also, this is one of the things that where I was like, I don't think, like from a strategic perspective, Iran should have taken the ceasefire deal, or this like 2-week pause. To be honest, because America is the one who needed this, right? Like they were getting real low on interceptors over in Israel, and America, you know, was probably getting low on its munitions and all that stuff. Like they were the ones that I think needed this more than Iran needed this. And that's where I go back to, it must have been China or somebody who like kind of forced their hand into doing this, because China wants stability more than anything, I think. While this is technically better for China than it is for America, the whole like America's, you know, shooting itself in the foot or whatever. I think that like, yeah, I think China would still prefer things to kind of just be like business as usual, just because they enjoy trading a lot, and trading requires, you know, relatively stable prices for oil in particular. So yeah, I don't know
if any will be involved.
Oh, sorry, but what I was going to say is, though, I think that Iran like is technically not in as good of a bargaining position now than they were when the ceasefire, like before the ceasefire started. And the only way that they will regain their like leverage and stuff to the same level that it was at before would be if they start firing on these ships. And in particular, if they fire on tankers that try to go through the Strait of Hormuz, like to make sure people understand, like you're not getting through no matter what, like America is not going to like we're the ones enforcing the blockade essentially or whatever. So there's like, if they do that, and also if they start firing on the American Navy assets in whatever country decides to go along with them in this blockade effort, like I think that that's the only way that they'll get back up to the same level of leverage that they had, essentially just restarting to exactly where they were before in terms of all of their missile and drone strikes across the region as well.
Strategy fraught with difficulties.
It seems to be probably at least part of a negotiating strategy to ratchet up tension on Iran, and also to hit them economically in terms of less revenues for Iran. Obviously that's key for him, and as well as potentially put pressure on Iran's partners such as China.
In Tehran, after nearly 40 days of constant airstrikes, to have pictures of negotiations on the front pages will come as some relief, even if they were not the headlines these people wanted.
I was really hoping they would make an agreement and reach a conclusion. It's been almost 45 days now, and I can see the stress in people. This is not what our country deserves.
I would like a way for the people of Iran to be happy. Anything that makes the people of Iran happy. I don't like this feeling of uncertainty. If the people are happy with war resolving it, then let the war happen so we can get some resolution.
Yeah.
Many in this country say they are tired of war. It is not clear if the imposition of a naval blockade on Iran's ports will make a return to fighting more or less likely.
I mean, I would say more likely, I guess, but it's more that it's just going to break down the the ceasefire negotiations, quote unquote, like even more. It'll, like I just think that it'll just end up going back to where we were before, with or eventually with Iran striking assets around the region or whatever. But who knows? I don't know exactly what Iran's like position here is when it comes to, or like what they are thinking necessarily when it comes to these negotiations right now. Like if they are taking it seriously, or if they're also just like, whatever, we'll take a 2-week pause, we'll rearm as well, and then we'll get back to it. I don't know exactly what their thoughts are.
Joe Inwood, BBC News.
Our Middle East Bureau Chief Joe Floto is in Jerusalem, and he said we're not yet learning how the US military will actually enforce this blockade in the Strait of Hormuz.
We're all waiting for 5 o'clock my time, 5:30 in Iran, to see exactly how the US military will enforce this blockade. On the one hand, we might think that this is a way of creating a safe passageway for international traffic, as you were pointing out. They're so vital to the world economy to pass through the Straits of Hormuz. The question will come with the US Navy trying to stop Iranian ships coming in and out of the Straits of Hormuz. What will happen at that point? The Iranians have said they're going to push back very robustly. And will that threaten this ceasefire? And we're barely a week in. We're actually not quite a week into this ceasefire. So both sides currently don't appear to want to escalate this to the point of a renewed war. And yet both sides appear very maximalist in what they're willing to demand and concede.
Joe Floto there. Let's take you to Pakistan and join our correspondent, Carrie Davies, who is in Islam.
Yeah, America is just delusional in what it's asking for in terms of the realities of the battlefield. Like, they're completely delusional. If they think they're going to end up getting even a fraction of what they have outlined in their proposal for what they want out of these negotiations, they are completely delusional. It's not going to happen. And eventually they will realize that, because they will be forced to. But yeah.
Islamabad, and has been following the talks for us over the weekend. What are you hearing from sources in Pakistan, Carrie, about what their expectation is of next steps? And is there talk that maybe further negotiations could take place? Is that the hope?
Well, Lucy, we definitely know that Pakistan wants to continue to be this facilitator between the US and Iran, and they want to continue to be, at the very least, passing messages back and forth between the two sides. And of course, we know they've been operating that back channel for the course of several weeks in the run-up towards these talks that happened over the course of the weekend. Of course, the big question is how much is that back channel potentially being used at the moment? We also know that that there have been sort of rumours circulating. Would they potentially go back to the negotiating table? Even President Trump had been talking about the suggestion. He said that he thought that Iran was going to come back to the negotiating table. Of course, we've had no confirmation from either side about whether they would be willing to have those sorts of discussions. We just don't know whether that is something that they're willing to do. But as we heard from Joe Floto and from Joe Inwood's pieces, we know that there is probably a lack of appetite for continued military conflict on both sides. It seems the fact that both of them came to Islamabad was seen as a very real effort to try to find some form of common ground, but their positions are so far apart.
That's where I'm not so sure. I do think that Iran was kind of like pushed to do this by China, if I had to guess, which I think was potentially a bad move from China's perspective, because any sort of view of being conciliatory to the West at all is going to inevitably lead to more conflict in the future. You have to be completely oppositional. There's nothing that America understands other than force. Like, you cannot negotiate with, I mean, not to borrow a phrase from George W. Bush, you can't negotiate with terrorists. Like, the American, terrorist regime is never, they fundamentally, all they want is to like project their own power no matter what. Right? Even at the cost of their own civilians and their own citizens and stuff. They care more about projecting power and, destabilizing and destroying other countries for their like pedo-billionaire overlords, so the only thing that they will ever respond to is force. As Iran learned from the initial parts of this war, where they got, sanctions relief, they got, like an incredible revenue source from the Strait of Hormuz. They they got I don't like they destroyed all of the bases. They essentially removed all of the American military bases from their region. They achieved all of that through military means, and so that's really, I think, the only thing that America understands. And one day America will have to like come to the negotiating table and agree to Iran's demands, because there's not going to be any other option, assuming that they don't capitulate, which I don't think that they will.
The big concern is whether or not these steps of blockading the Strait of Hormuz, does that lead to further escalation, even if both sides would actually quite like to be able to find some form of off-ramp here?
Carrie, great to get that update from you. Thank you so much. We have some breaking news to bring you, actually, about what is happening out in the Gulf at the moment. Being reported on the Reuters news agency that 2 Iranian-linked tankers have actually exited the Gulf via the Strait of Hormuz. This is ahead of the blockade, the US blockade that is coming up. So there is some movement happening out there in the Gulf. 2 Iranian-linked tankers exiting the Gulf via the Strait of Hormuz.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on to another video, but related.
After failing to
let me pull it up here. So this is just from 22 minutes ago. I wanted to get to see if there's any new things of like what's going on. Maybe actually this one will be better. This is CBS. At least, I mean, it is Barry Weiss's CBS, but at least I recognize the channel. So let's see if they have any information on how this blockade is actually going to be implemented. And we'll see if they've stopped any Iranian vessels or whatever. So let's go.
President Trump says the U.S. military blockade of Iran's ports and the partial blockade of the Strait of Hormuz is underway. It sets the stage for a showdown that poses serious risks for the global economy and risks to the fragile ceasefire now in place. I'm joined now by Dr. Sumantra Matra, fellow at the Royal Historical Society and founder of the Clio Strategic Consultancy. And Dr. Matra, thanks for being here. Let's take us through how this blockade will work. How are things going to work?
So military blockade essentially is kind of playing a poker game. It is, on one hand, dependent on the overwhelming force of the U.S. Navy. But on the other hand, it is also a bluff, because at the end of the day, you have to enforce a blockade. So imagine a situation where we have 20 and 30 U.S. Navy ships standing, and there is one Chinese Navy ship escorting a Chinese tanker. At that point of time, it becomes a problem. Because at that point of time, either we let them pass, as the kind of similar operations that we do in Taiwan, near Taiwan, for example, where we play on their insecurities and kind of like dare them to shoot at us, that kind of like gets reversed and puts them on the U.S. Navy. So eventually, one can imagine, you know, in the coming days, we would see whether the blockade is, one, serious, that is whether the U.S. Navy is interested in seizing a ship, in boarding a tanker vessel, anyone who's trying to cross the blockade, and, you know, taking control of that ship, or it is essentially kind of like pressuring Iran to come to a deal.
It seems like President Trump is downplaying the impact of the Strait's closure on the U.S., but what is the global impact?
The global impact is not good. The United States is sort of insulated.
Well, it's kind of the opposite of what they already did, which they released the sanctions on the Iranian oil so that that could flood the market and keep the prices relatively low. But if they are going to actually enforce this blockade, which seems kind of up in the air at this point, but if they are going to actually enforce it, then that would just counteract that. And it would be a straight up like 20% of the world's oil is just gone for the foreseeable, or like as long as America decides to do this. So it will have an impact here as well.
From the global impact in a way because of geography and because the U.S. is fundamentally fuel independent. But we are already seeing pressure of the fuel prices in Europe. For example, recently in Hungary, there was an election a couple of days back, and the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban lost. One of the reasons why he lost was because the fuel cost was so high for average Hungarians. Europe is especially problematic in this situation. The Gulf states are not being able to ramp up as much fuel supply as they could because of Iranian pressure and Iran being next to them. The United States has so far not felt that much amount of pressure, but if it continues, it would harm us too.
Well, I just filled up my car the other day. I felt that pressure. That just sucked.
Is the U.S. risking an escalation in the region over this? Like, what if China or Russia sends warships to escort their tankers?
See, that is the biggest worry. At that point of time, they're daring us to shoot or sink their ships. It is unlikely that the Russians are going to do that, but there is very much a possibility of the Chinese doing that, or even think of friendly countries like India or South Korea passing through. Are we going to seize their ship? Are we going to board them? Are they going to continue a free?
Even if they do that, I don't think that America is willing to, number one, I don't think America is really that willing to start to expand this war from being a regional war to a global war, right? Which is what that risk would, that's what the risk would entail of shooting down a Chinese naval ship or something that's protecting an oil tanker going through. But also, oh God, I forgot what I was going to say now. It'll come back to me, I'm sure.
Freedom of navigation operation that we do next to Taiwan? These are not the questions that have been answered by the administration or by Pentagon. According to the Naval Rule Book, you can blockade a coastal line if you are officially at war with a country.
Oh, I remember what I was going to say now. If it did happen, though, I will almost guarantee you that there would be back channel discussions before China does allow their ship to go through or something. I would guess that they would communicate with America, we're going to do this and you're going to let us or whatever. And, if you don't, it'll be an international incident, or be we'll give you a slightly more favorable deal if you let us, keep shipping our stuff through. And then, Trump could come out and say, oh, because of our great relations with China, we're actually going to allow China. I don't know. There's probably a way that he could sell it if he wanted to, but I would be pretty sure that they are going to have a, communication with America before they even try that.
Provided that you're blockading the ships coming out of the country under that country's flag. It's a little tricky when it comes to third-party ships going and passing through those regions. And we haven't had any answer from the Pentagon so far. So eventually, push comes to shove, if the Chinese are sending a warship next to the Chinese flag's tanker, then at that point of time, it would be unto us or the U.S. Navy to actually board or seize that ship or let them pass. And it's either way. If we let them pass, then it's humiliating for the U.S. Navy iceberg.
Yeah.
Dr. Mitra, thank you.
We'll see what happens. I don't know. I just think it's also this is so against what America needs domestically, right? In terms of getting the gas prices down lower. This should shoot the gas prices up pretty high, I think. Because you're just getting rid of that source that was at least getting exported to some countries before, even if they had to pay a fine, or even if they had to buy it in Chinese yuan or whatever, right? There was oil being exported before. And if America does actually enforce this blockade, which is, like I said, still up in the air, then yeah, it would shut it off entirely. I don't think that that would be any, that huge of a deal for Iran in particular. It would shut off one of its revenue sources, but I think that it would still, Iran has other ways of, of making money. So, I think I remember reading, it was what, on oil revenue percentage. Says about 20%, 10 to 20%. So, shutting off that 10 to 20% of their revenue or their income is, it's a big deal, obviously, but they're in a wartime economy. They'll be able to absorb those blows, and, people over there will be willing to suffer if they see a vision for how in the end it could lead to a more sovereign or a more free Iran. So, I don't know. It just seems, I don't really see this as, this is one of Trump's classics. am trying to find a way to escalate without actually escalating is what it feels like to me. Because like, I don't know. I don't know. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. Who knows? Maybe this will be a brilliant move by our big, beautiful boy.